Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're gonna be talking about the presidents of the United States. So the first one on our list is George Washington. Let's see. As you can see that he was the first president of the United States. He was born on February 22, 1732, and he was one of the founding fathers of the United States. He served as president from 1789 to 1797. Um, um, he was also the commander in chief of the Continental Army. He wasn't he wasn't really a good general, but he was good at spotting talent for his positions in the military. Um, he he actually warned the nations against permanent alliances and uh, and not to have political parties because he thought they might divide the country. Um, he was a slave owner, which was really bad, but some people might say that he was a man of his era, but slavery is still inexcusable. Um, he was a good president though. During his presidency, the Whiskey Rebellion happened in the United States, and he personally led the military out, and without firing a single shot, the Whiskey Rebellion ended, which showed his significant leadership. He personally he was a he was a Federalist, which included John Adams and Alexander Hamilton, and he was pro-British, while Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and who's the other guy? Aaron Burr were pro-French. He did not want the Americans to interfere in European affairs, and and during his time in office, the United States signed the Jay Treaty, which was a treaty with Britain, and this made Thomas Jefferson so mad that he actually resigned as Washington's Secretary of State. Um, um, Washington, during Washington's time as president, he didn't live in the White House because the White House hasn't been built yet. Um, so as you can see here, it actually shows some of the cabinet positions during Washington's time. In 1789, the cabinet included the State Department, the War Department, and the Treasury Department, and the Attorney General, and Secretary of War, Secretary of the Treasury was Alexander Hamilton. He was Washington was from Virginia, um, and Thomas Jefferson was also from Virginia. Most of our early presidents were from Virginia because it was because it was one of the most populated states in the country at the time. Um, he George Washington was personally against slavery, but he also didn't want to give his slaves away because he benefited from them, which seemed very hypocritical. And his vice president, John Adams, never owned slaves, but that was partly due to the fact that he was from Massachusetts, which outlawed slavery, and he was a northern. And um, yeah, so unfortunately, let's see, four of our first five presidents owned slaves, which is very sad. And four of our first five presidents were from Virginia, which is kind of awesome because you have four out of five guys from the same state. Let's see what am I. Let's see what I'm forgetting here. Okay, so I guess during Washington's presidency, there was like a debate between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist, between how much power the government should have. Um, the Federalist wanted wanted the government to have more power than the Anti-Federalist, and the Federalist favored a national bank, while the Anti-Federalist favored a states bank. Um, oh yeah, he was one of two presidents to be to be unanimously elected by the Electoral College, and he did that twice in his both terms. Um, George Washington could have been a king, but he declined the offer. And a little fun fact about George Washington: he never knew that dinosaur existed because because the first dinosaur fossil was discovered after he died in 17 he died in 1799, and the first dinosaur fossil was discovered in the 1800s. He actually set like two traditions. The first tradition that he set um, was that a president can only serve two terms, but that tradition was broken by Franklin Roosevelt when he ran for the unprecedented third term. Um, Before that, there was no amendment that stopped you from running for a third term. That happened after after World War II when they passed an amendment that that limited presidents to only 2 terms in office. And he was also the he was also for the president that set the tradition to deliver a farewell address. And yeah, so this is all about George Washington, I guess, because oh yeah, he was one of two presidents who who didn't have a political party, even though his policies seemed a bit like the Federalist policies. Um, oh yeah, Washington was in the British Army before he joined the American Revolution. This is a famous painting of him crossing the Delaware River, and to his and the person behind him is James Monroe, who is the fifth president. Oh yeah, he actually continued to be the commander in chief of the army until he died. It was more like a symbolic position because he remained in his home state Virginia after he left the presidency. Next up on our list is John Adams. So he's the second president of the United States. He was born on October 30, 1735 and died on July 4th, 1826. And that date has a very important significance because it is also the date where Thomas Jefferson died. Who's the third president? John Adams also lived a very long life. He lived to 90 years, which was the longest a president had lived until Herbert Hoover broke that record in 19 I don't know if he broke the record or not because he also lived to 90 years. Oh yeah, he's one of the two presidents to have a son also as president. The other one being George H.W. Bush. Okay, so he's a really smart guy, but he was not a good president because during his term, the the Congress passed the Alien and Sedition Act, which basically restricted free speech and targeted um, anybody who was a who seemed a threat to national security, I guess. And it also made it harder to become a citizen. Oh yeah, so I forgot to mention. I think it was during George Washington's presidency where the XYZ affair happened, where the X, Y, and Z were like three French diplomats that actually like took bribes from the Americans. Like they took bribes from the Americans to let me search it up. What was it? The XYZ affair was a major diplomatic scandal in 1797-1798, where French agents demanded large bribe and loans from American diplomats to negotiate a end to French seizure of U.S. ships. Okay, so this happened during John Adams' presidency. Oh yeah, during this time, the electoral college was a bit different because yeah, because like during this time you have who whoever receives the most electoral votes becomes presidents uh, becomes president, and the second person who receives the second most electoral votes become vice president. So you have a situation where John Adams is the president and Thomas Jefferson is the vice president, and they're both from different political parties. So, yeah, oh yeah, Adams also avoided war with Britain and France. So, so when the election of 1800 came, the relationship between Adams and Jefferson was not that good, and the campaigns got really heated, and they made like very bad remarks against one another. But yeah, but once the election of 1800 happens, this guy wins the election, and he becomes our third president. And, and as you can see, he also died on July 4th, 1826. So when Thomas Jefferson becomes president, um, I'm pretty sure I am pretty sure that John Adams didn't it didn't attend Thomas Jefferson's inauguration. I could be wrong though. So when he becomes president, he actually repeals the Alien and Sedition Act, and during his time in office, the United States purchases Louisiana, which is a large territory um, from France. So, and they purchased that for like, how much was that? For $15 million. And it's 828,000 square miles. This doubles the size of the United States. And that is a pretty good bargain. Jefferson actually like went against when Jefferson went against his own principles and purchased the Louisiana Purchase, which which is a very good thing. And yeah, so Jefferson remains really popular, and he actually got selected to a second term, but that second term didn't go as well as didn't go as well for him because the Embargo Act happened, which was the which was a US law halting American ships from trading with foreign ports. And this was a disaster for the US economy because they couldn't trade from because they couldn't trade with Britain, they couldn't trade with France. So who are they gonna trade with? No one. Yeah, but it was repealed after like in 1809. It was repealed in 1809. Um, so yeah, so bad luck for his second term, but he still remained really popular. Um, yeah, but Thomas Jefferson personally is not a good person. I won't get into that discussion. You can look it up. You can look it up for yourself. Next up, we have James Madison. Oh yeah, James Madison is the father of the Constitution. He wasn't the only one that wrote the Constitution, but he is considered the father of the Constitution. And he's the fourth president. Thomas Jefferson was the writer of the Declaration of Independence, where he famously said that all men are created equal, but that wasn't the case because African Americans were were enslaved, and just like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, they personally hated slavery, but then they refused to do something about it, which kind of which kind of let them seem hypocritical. So gets them. James Madison gets the nation into the War of 1812 with Britain, which was the war that burned down the White House. Um, the war ended in a tie. So I guess nothing came of the war. Yeah, but the United States wanted to fight the war to I guess, prove a point that they were still like competitive to Britain or something. I don't know why they fight. I don't know why they fought the war. Oh yeah, because this could be a reason. Because the British were were taking American ships. They were like invading American ships and then and then kidnapping American sailors. Most of them were British sailors actually. Yeah, but that part didn't come out. Yeah, so after the war, James Madison, there's nothing. Yeah, he got elected to a second term. I don't remember him doing anything actually. Let me look it up. Hmm. There's a yeah. It talks about the War of 1812, and oh yeah. So during this time, a lot of presidents had racist policies against the Native Americans. Yeah, he didn't do a lot during his presidency except for the war and his policies against the Native Americans. And during this time, the Federalist Party is basically gone. Next up, we have James Monroe. He is also from Virginia, and and he also hated slavery personally, but he didn't free his slaves. So so this is a pattern that you see that they're all hypocrites in some way. Um, I guess. Oh yeah, he was the other president that was unanimously elected by the Electoral College in his second term. Or was it his second term? It could be his both terms. Oh yeah, during his time, it was known as the era of good feelings. And the United States acquired Florida from Spain during his time, which had something to do with Andrew Jackson because he invaded Florida, which was under Spain, and then he chased them, and then he chased like the Native Americans living in Spain, I guess. In Florida, which was a colony of Spain. There's nothing. Oh yeah, there's the Monroe Doctrine. That's that's an important thing. So James Monroe basically comes up with this doctrine which which said that the Europeans are not allowed to interfere in the affairs of the Americas and that the Americas would not interfere in the affairs of the Europeans, which is a important important foreign policy doctrine because this would dictate American foreign policy until the until William McKinley becomes president in 1896. Yeah, there's nothing about him after that. Oh yeah, there's the what am I doing? There's the Missouri Compromise, which wait a minute, let me find it. Let me just search it up. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was a landmark U.S. federal law that admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state, maintaining the delicate balance of power between free and slave states in the Congress. Um, it also prohibited slavery in the rest of the Louisiana Purchase territory north of the 3630 parallel, temporarily easing sectional tension but setting the stage for future conflicts over slavery expansion that eventually led to the Civil War. Okay, so there's also the Panic of 1819, which really doesn't matter that much because the economy soon recovered after that. So next up we move to John Quincy Adams. He is probably the smartest president that the United States have ever had. He is the son of John Adams. Um, so he's he's remembered for the corrupt bargain that he made with Henry Clay. Where okay, so we have to go back to the presidential election of 1824. So in that election, Andrew Jackson received the most votes, and he also won the popular vote. But it was John Quincy Adams who came in second place that ended up winning the presidency because he made a corrupt bargain with Henry Clay where Clay would influence members of the House of Representatives which had to pick the president because no candidate received the required amount of electoral votes to win the presidency. And Clay was the Speaker of the House. And so Clay favored John Quincy Adams, and in return, Clay was made the Secretary of State under John Quincy Adams. And during this time, Secretary of State was the position almost every former president has held before they became president. And and this made Andrew Jackson so mad that he went off and and founded a party called the Democratic Party alongside Martin Van Buren. He is also remembered for the Tariff of 1828. Oh yeah, the Tariff of 1828 um, hurt the agricultural states but helped the industrial states. So, so this didn't help him get any votes in the South, unfortunately. And 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 he and he was a guy that seemed to like very out of touch with the American people because he was seen as an elite guy. He didn't know how to communicate well with the American people, I guess, which he did limit the spending of Congress, and he was one of the presidents that actually decreased the depth of the United States, and the corrupt bargain really hurt his legacy. So in 1828, when he's running for a re-election, he loses to Andrew Jackson, who actually wins the presidency this time. So, yeah, so when Jackson becomes president, he's all for the common man. He, oh yeah, during this time, you don't have to own property to vote. Unlike, oh yeah, you have to be a white male citizen and do not have to own property to vote. Yeah, so Andrew Jackson is seen as this common man who defends the common man against the elites in Washington. He actually he's formally against the National Bank. He's a big fan of Thomas Jefferson. Andrew Jackson wants the states to run their own banks, so he vetoes the proposal um for a third bank of the United States, the National Bank, which actually leads to the creation of the Whig Party under Henry Clay. During his time, there was also the Indian Removal Act, which 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 unconstitutionally and displaced in the Indians from their homelands. It was a very bad. Yeah, it was bad because the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Native Americans to remain on their land, but Andrew Jackson refused to enforce the ruling. He was the only president to pay off the national debt during his time. During his time in office, the U.S. had no national debt, which is a good thing, I guess. Um, and he's a famous war hero. He's a famous war hero. He fought in the War of 1812 and helped the United States conquer Florida. Andrew Jackson remained largely popular during his time in office. His economic policies was a disaster, and it actually contributed um, to the panic of 1837, which during that time Jackson was already gone. So Martin Van Buren had to deal with that. Yeah, so we have to go to Martin Van Buren now. Yeah, he's the vice president of Jackson. Jackson had another vice president that resigned, the, and it was John C. Calhoun, who resigned because of the, I guess, the nullification crisis, which was a crisis where South Carolina refused to pay a tariff that the national government had set. Yeah, but the crisis was over quickly because thanks to Henry Clay, who actually came up with a plan to lower the tariff, and and South Carolina actually paid the tariff. And John C. Calhoun was from South Carolina, so he resigned in protest. So Martin Van Buren, um, yeah, during his presidency there was nothing except recession, the Panic of 1837. He did nothing to stop it. He is the only president to speak English as a second language. His first language was Dutch, and he's the first president to be born after the United States became a country. Yeah, so nothing for Martin Van Buren, I guess. No, let's go see William Henry Harrison. Oh yeah, William Henry Harrison, nothing for him, I guess. He was the first Whig president. Um, he died 31 days after he became president, and that was due to the fact that he actually drank the DC water, which was not good because that DC water contained some germs, or yeah, it was like cholera or something like germs. He drank the DC water and then he died 31 days after that. He also gave the longest inaugural address in US history, which lasted like 4 hours or something, tearing the rain, but yeah, but that didn't cause him to die. So he was the first president to die in office. He was also the oldest president elected up to that point. Let's move on to the 10th president, John Tyler. Okay, so John Tyler was born. John Tyler was born on. Where does he say that? 1790, and he still has one grandson living. I think so. Let me check. Oh yeah, he doesn't have any grandson living now. He used to have one until May until May of 2025. John Tyler was oh yeah, John Tyler actually like actually was the second president to not have a political party because even though he was a Whig, he was the vice president to William Henry Harrison. Yeah, but he actually vetoed his own party's uh, own party's bills, which which left him without a political party for the rest of his term. So so there's nothing for him. Yeah. Then we have to go to James K. Polk. Yeah, Polk was the 11th president. So so he becomes president in 1845. He he adds Texas, Oregon, and California to the United States, which is a good thing. Yeah, but he provoked a unnecessary war with Mexico to do that, and he was criticized for it by the Whigs, including one congressman named Abraham Lincoln. He promised to only serve one term, and he did exactly that. But after serving one term, he died 3 months after that due to a cholera outbreak. So it wasn't a cholera outbreak, but he got cholera from drinking the DC water, I guess. So then we have Zachary Taylor, who's another Whig president. James K. Polk was a Democratic president. Zachary Taylor is a Whig president. And he also dies in office from a stomach virus. His presidency is only a year long. During his presidency, there was like a issue whether the new states that became part of the union, like California, Texas, would be a slave or a free state. And him, despite being a southerner and owning slaves, wanted California to be a free state. But he died without getting much of anything done. He was a war hero of the Mexican-American War. And then we have Millard Fillmore, who signed the Compromise of 1850, which, let me see what it is. The Compromise of 1850 was a package of 5 separate bills passed by U.S. Congress to diffuse tensions between North and South over slavery, admitting California as a free state, establishing popular sovereignty for New Mexico/Utah territories, ending the slave trade, not slavery in D.C., setting Texas's boundary and enacting a stricter Fugitive Slave Act, ultimately delaying Civil War but intensifying conflicts over runaway slaves. So as you can see, it delayed the Civil War, basically kicking the can down the road. And that's the only highlight of Millard Fillmore's presidency, I guess, because there's nothing else to add. Oh yeah, he was the last